Our story begins in a game world called Brave of Asterisk. It's an RPG where players become Alan, the hero of the game, and battle demons. But here's where things get crazy. A young man collapsed from stress and died after working too hard at a brutal company. But death wasn't the end of his story. Instead, he was reincarnated into the world of his beloved game, Brave of Asterisk. Now he's just Silva, a gate guard stationed in the capital city called Zalencia. Compared to his old job, this new life is basically a vacation. He gets paid to stand around and admits it's a shame he's not Alan, the real hero. But then, a familiar face appears. A beautiful blonde girl approaches his post. She's Charles Orland, an important character from the game who becomes the player's friend early on. Our protagonist recognizes her immediately since Charles was his favorite character in the game. A shopkeeper tries to scam Charles by selling her a holy sword blessed by the Fairy King. The man says even a rookie can get strong fast with such a powerful weapon. But Silva still finds her adorable, even if she's kind of clueless. But just then, a voice calls out from the background, asking Charles to wait. It's Alan, the hero, pointing at the shopkeeper and calling him a scammer. Alan drags Charles away from the scam, saying he'll help her gather herbs instead. The shady shopkeeper then calls Silva, trying to sell the fake sword cheaply. However, Silva declines, saying he's just a gate guard and a normal sword is good enough. The shopkeeper calls him weird, while Silva tells him to scam someone else. In his past life, Brave of Asterisk was the only thing that cheered him up during stressful workdays, and he knows the story too well. If things go as in the game, Silva knows that Alan and his team will save the world. In the game, demons attack often, and to survive, you must keep getting stronger. Silva's style is simple. Hit max level early and get stronger fast. It's the fastest way to beat the game, and now maybe life here too. Using his game knowledge, he'll max out his stats at the perfect place and train for years. But he's not intending to replace Alan, the hero, as Silva loves the original story and will never forgive anyone who tries to change it. Just watching the scenario play out from afar is good enough for him. Later that day, a cheerful guy named Modi at the gate says they should get drinks after work. Silva lights up since nothing beats a cold beer after a long day. But then, something catches Silva's attention. Someone calls for help, and Silva spots a terrifying sight. A massive demon has appeared in the city streets. Silva immediately recognizes the event. This event, called the Wedge Day, happens about a month before the main story begins. During Wedge Day, demons team up and launch a rare joint attack on the kingdom. Seeing the demon, the guards jump into action. Modi shouts for them to hold it off until the hero comes. Meanwhile, Silva notices the demon is only level 1, meaning it's not that strong. But it's also not weak enough for regular soldiers to handle. Taking it down wouldn't be hard for Silva, but he has to be careful not to disrupt the game's scenario. The best move would be to stall the monster until the hero shows up. Suddenly, Silva sees the demon strike Modi. When he asks if he's okay, Modi brushes it off, saying it just grazed him. But when Silva turns back, he sees the demon fleeing. Angry that the demon hurt his friend, Silva charges forward and gives chase. Modi watches in awe, wondering when Silva got so fast on his feet. Meanwhile, the pretty Charles moves through the forest, collecting herbs. Then she finishes her task and decides to regroup with Alan. But suddenly, strange sounds started to echo through the trees. Charles looks around, confused, feeling that something is off. She spots movement in the shadows and realizes something is indeed wrong. At the same time, Silva chases the demon, wishing he had sliced a leg to slow it down. The creature runs fast through the forest, forcing him to keep up. The chase brings Silva to Charles. But he quickly ducks behind a tree, confused about why she's there. Silva figures he needs to compose himself and think back to the game's scenario. According to the story, Charles doesn't die during this event, so with that in mind, Silva tells himself it's going to be okay since she's not supposed to die here. But then, something unexpected happens. The demon charges toward Charles, aiming to hurt her. As she lets out a scream, Silva refuses to just stand there while she's in danger. So he rushes forward, yelling at the demon to back off his Charles. Lost in the moment, Silva draws his sword and uses Zalencia's sword style. Then comes his spinning top move, which slices the demon in half like an onion. The battle ends with the demon defeated and Silva stands in silence, stunned while Charles stares at him in amazement. Silva immediately rushes over to check if she's okay, asking if she's hurt or if the demon got her. When Charles reassures him that she's fine, Silva gets flustered and starts rambling. Then he realizes that he has totally overreacted and made a fool of himself. Charles looks at him with curiosity and asks who he really is. Silva tries to stay cool but panics inside as he says he's just a gatekeeper. Charles says she's not asking about his job but wants to know his real name. As Charles steps closer, asking again, the two stand face to face in the quiet forest. Finally, Silva gives in and introduces himself properly. Inside, Silva's freaking out. His actions have changed the game's story in ways he didn't see coming. Back at the city gate, Silva is worried. Fighting that demon near Charles might have messed with the game's storyline, but he had no choice. Now he just hopes it won't stir up too much trouble. Just then, Modi calls out to him. The gruff old man tells him he's received a direct summons from the captain of the elite Holy Guard and must report to their headquarters immediately. Silva looks confused and asks what the captain wants with him. In response, Modi grabs his shoulder and says he doesn't know what kind of mess Silva has caused, but promises to take care of his funeral. Silva tries to play dumb, but Modi isn't buying it. Modi warns him that the captain of the elite Holy Knights is known for being extremely stern, and hopes Silva gets off easy. Shortly afterward, at the elite Holy Knights' headquarters, Silva is led inside by guards. As he enters the castle, he notices a girl in one of the rooms and immediately becomes nervous. If it were up to him, he'd much rather avoid meeting her. Meanwhile, a pretty chick in knight armor is seen in what looks like a library or study. She's examining some kind of document or map, lost in thought. Suddenly, she notices Silva approaching and lights up with excitement. Silva is escorted into a grand chamber where he meets this hot girl who tells him he's done well to come. Silva immediately notices her deep blue eyes, her lustrous silver hair, and of course her huge mummy milkers, one of the most iconic features in the entire game. He quickly remembers her as the captain of the elite Knights Order, Elda Snowhite. She's also one of the conquerable love interests in the original story. Silva nervously stammers and asks if she needs something from him. Elda pouts playfully and calls him a thick-headed guy. In his thoughts, Silva wonders if Elda summoned him because she somehow figured out his true abilities. But just then, Elda's expression shifts. She gets serious and asks Silva directly if he's the one who took out the demon. Silva panics internally. He tries to play dumb, asking what she means by that. Elda clarifies that she's talking about the demon attack that happened the other day. She explains that there was a report of a demon corpse found, completely ripped apart. Elda continues her interrogation, pointing out that the demon appeared to have been taken down using the spinning top technique. She adds that, aside from the hero, the only person capable of pulling off that move should be the captain of the Holy Knights. But since none of them were present during the attack, she asks, who else could it have been? Silva freezes in shock when Elda then suggests that he might be the one who defeated the demon, and then asks him to become a knight of the country. Silva realizes his peaceful life might get completely ruined if he gets dragged into this mess. So he pushes back, urging Elda to reconsider. He insists the hero might have been the one who actually defeated the demon. Elda calls him naive, tapping her hand impatiently as she explains. She says the hero is duty-bound to report all demon suppressions to the country, and yet the only person unaccounted for in the defeat of that spider creature is still unknown. She tells Silva it's time to face the truth and asks if he'll behave himself by joining the Knight's Order. Still, Silva refuses to admit anything. He insists this isn't happening and says he won't stand for it. Elda grows frustrated when Silva points out that she doesn't have any solid proof to back her claims. She then asks why he's so against the idea of joining the Knight's Order. Deciding to sweeten the deal, Elda lays out all the benefits of joining the Knights. He'd receive a handsome wage, far better than the peanuts he makes as a gate guard, plus other perks provided by the country. Hearing all this, Silva starts to get mixed feelings about the situation. If he accepts, he'll be forced to take on missions alongside the hero. Elda confirms this, explaining that his role would be to support the hero and help protect the country. Even so, Silva makes his position clear. He says he doesn't want to get close to the main characters. When Elda asks what he's talking about, Silva brushes it off as nothing and firmly states that he has no plans to become a knight. Elda calls it a crying shame. She starts advancing on Silva with her weapon drawn. Grinning wickedly, she says that now things have come to this point, she can't afford to be picky about which methods she uses. Elda then shockingly shows him a letter of admission, already signed by him. Seeing the forged letter, Silva freezes in shock and protests that he doesn't remember signing anything. With a spark of cunning in her eyes, Elda tells him he can get away with that kind of trickery once he becomes part of the Knight's Order. But Silva replies, saying he never expected she'd go that far with forgery. Moving over to a cupboard, Elda casually claims she was just joking, then says she can't force anyone to join without their consent. She then tosses a document to Silva, and Silva asks what the document is. Elda replies that she's giving up on recruiting him for the Knight's Order, but instead, she wants him to do her a favor. When Silva opens the document, he sees the face of a dude that looks like a criminal and immediately asks who the clapped-face guy is. Elda smirks and reveals that the meme-faced is Bragio Birdley, an applicant hopping to take the entrance trials to join the Knight's Order. She explains that she wants Silva to stop this guy from getting in. Silva recognizes that name Birdley and asks Elda if they aren't from an incredibly famous family. When Elda asks Silva if he knows about the Birdley family, he says yes. But Elda calls this particular member an irredeemable scumbag who needs to be dealt with. She then reveals her plan. Elda explains that she can't simply fail Bragio. He's still a noble, and that means pressure would come from the higher-ups. That's where Silva comes in. She wants him to fight Bragio in a mock battle during the entrance trials. Her request is simple: beat Bragio senselessly enough to convince her coworkers and superiors that the guy isn't fit to join the Knight's Order. Silva quickly realizes she's using him as a form of sabotage. Still, he agrees, on one condition. He wants to be left alone afterward, with no more invitations to join the Knight's Order. Elda agrees to his terms and tells him she's counting on him. After the meeting, Silva leaves the castle looking completely drained. Elda just dumped one heck of a bothersome job on him. He reflects on the situation. If he slips up, he might end up affecting the plot. Even if he wins, Bragio still has connections to the Knight's Order, and he's a character who doesn't appear in the main story at all. Silva realizes he knows nothing about this Bragio guy, since the game never mentioned him. That means he'll need to gather more information. But then doubt creeps in. What if he screws up again like before? However, he quickly reminds himself that he has to keep contact with the main characters to a minimum. Suddenly, someone taps him on the shoulder. He turns around in shock to see Charles approaching with a friendly wave. Silva panics internally. He wasn't expecting to run into her here. Charles asks if he's surprised to see her again, but Silva tries to play it cool, saying he's not surprised at all. He even claims he's actually happy to run into her. Charles then accuses him of running off after saving her the other day and says she's been looking for him ever since. But Silva claims that he had some pressing matters to attend to and sincerely apologizes for leaving without saying a word. Charles suddenly gets more serious and asks Silva how he knows her name. This catches Silva off guard since he's been using knowledge from the game. So he lies, saying he was once assigned to guard some nobles at a party and happened to see her name on the guest list. Silva feels a pang of guilt for lying to her, but Charles seems relieved that there's at least a logical explanation. She tells him there's no need to be so uptight around her, and that he doesn't have to be overly polite either. She insists with a pout, and Silva agrees. Charles says she can't just ignore what happened and wants to thank him properly, but Silva says there's no need for thanks. He was just doing his duty as a soldier. Still, Charles insists on repaying his kindness. She offers to help him with anything he needs, even with his work. Silva thinks hard about her offer. He figures that granting the request of his favorite character is the sacred duty of every nerd. So he agrees and asks if Charles would mind tagging along with him for an investigation he's currently working on. Chapter 2.3 Shortly afterward, Silva and Charles head into Zelensha's red light district to track down their target. The Birdley family is one of the most powerful noble houses in the country, but this particular member has a serious reputation problem. The Birdleys have given a huge sum of money to the royal family, earning them high prestige in the process. Word on the street is that the family is involved in human trafficking and illegal drug deals. With how popular the Birdleys are, it wasn't hard to dig up information about where Bragio has been seen recently. While walking down the busy streets, Silva notices Charles looking around nervously and asks what's wrong. Charles quickly covers her face with her hands, feeling embarrassed, and asks Silva where he plans to take her. Silva nearly has a heart attack and insists she's got it all wrong. Seeing how flustered he is, Charles laughs and tells him she's just kidding. She walks a bit ahead and says she hopes they find this Bragio guy he's been searching for. As it turns out, Bragio is a spoiled brat who wastes his parents' money on booze. But Silva is having a hard time figuring out where exactly the drunken master usually stays. Based on the info he gathered, Bragio should be somewhere in the area. Maybe Silva just arrived too early. Just then his stomach growls, making him cringe in embarrassment. Summoning his courage, he asks Charles if she's hungry. Charles confirms she is, saying she's actually starving. So Silva quickly suggests they look for a restaurant that serves good food. Charles then points in a direction, saying she can smell something delicious coming from there. Once they arrive at the eatery, Charles takes a bite of her hamburger and her eyes light up with pure joy. Silva watches her eat and thinks to himself how unexpected this is. Charles comes from a noble family, but it's clear she absolutely loves hamburgers. With both hands holding the hamburger, Charles complains about not getting a proper bite and how sad it makes her. Silva notices and points out that her hands and mouth are smaller compared to his. But Charles shrugs and says it's not all bad, at least she gets to enjoy the bun part too. Silva watches as she happily munches away, thinking about how she eats hamburgers. He finds it so adorable, he feels like he's about to pass on to the afterlife, just from witnessing his favorite character's cutest habits. A few minutes later, Charles finishes eating and shifts back to business mode. She thanks Silva for the food and asks where they'll be heading next. Silva realizes it's already gotten pretty late. So he tells Charles he thinks it's best if he continues the investigation alone, since the red light district gets dangerous at night. Suddenly, a loud voice cuts through the restaurant. Someone shouts, "Hey!" and Silva turns to see a group of scarecrow-looking thugs surrounding their table. The huncho of the misfits steps then forward with a menacing glare and asks the restaurant owner if there are any spare tables on the second floor. Everyone in the restaurant starts whispering. Word is the guy had snapped at someone just the other day over slow service and even threw a glass. There are also rumors that he's been forcing himself on girls. The shop owner, clearly panicking, approaches the scoundrels and explains that the restaurant is at full capacity. But the leader, annoyed, shouts at him for not having a table ready. The leader then proudly announces his name, Braggio Birdley, and says the restaurant should be honored to be blessed by his presence. Braggio demands that if there are no spare tables, then they better make one for him. The restaurant owner nervously apologizes and tries to accommodate the troublemaker. Meanwhile, Charles looks confused and asks Silva if this isn't the guy he's been searching for. Silva confirms it is and calls Braggio an utter dirtbag, just like everyone said he'd be. At the same time, Braggio insults the shop owner, calling him useless trash, and says he'll just hit up another restaurant. But just as he and his crew are about to leave, Braggio spots Charles sitting with Silva. With a creepy smile, he approaches their table and locks eyes on Charles. He asks if they've met before. When Charles doesn't respond, he pushes further, asking why she's acting so cold. He claims they met at a noble's party the other day. Charles looks puzzled and says she doesn't remember meeting him. That sets Braggio off. He screams, demanding to know how she could not recognize him. Then the creep leans in closer and says he's about to take his sweet time making sure she remembers him. Braggio compliments her beauty, claiming it's well known across high society. He adds that he's always wanted the chance to get closer to her. Meanwhile, Charles looks extremely uncomfortable as he invades her personal space and then firmly says she's not interested. Silva watches the situation unfold, his anger steadily building. He thinks to himself that the lowlife has some nerve openly hitting on Lady Charles like that. But the sleazy noble doesn't take no for an answer. He suggests they head somewhere more private for some top-tier fruit juice and the finest food and wine. But Charles, politely but firmly, says she's not old enough to drink yet, trying to deflect his advances. Braggio gets a disgusting look in his eyes as he angrily stares at Charles. He then notices Silva standing protectively behind her and sneers, asking if that's her bodyguard over there. Before Charles can respond, Silva calmly steps forward and announces that he is the loyal guard of Lady Charles. Silva winks, knowing that by claiming to be Charles' bodyguard, he now has every right to protect Lady Charles without holding back. As Charles backs up Silva's story, confirming, yes, he is her bodyguard, Braggio bursts into laughter. He mocks Silva, asking if Charles really expects someone with that bland, background character face to protect a noble. Silva, on the other hand, gives a fake smile, but deep down, he's seriously tempted to lop this guy's head off right then and there. Braggio doesn't stop. He mocks Charles next, saying her family must be running low on staff, then teasingly offers to lend her one of his men. The situation escalates when the noble calls for his guards, and several intimidating men appear, surrounding Silva and Charles. Braggio brags that his guards are all elite former holy knights, handpicked by House Birdley, and then smugly tells Charles and Silva to feast their eyes on his prized fighters. However, Silva finds it pathetic seeing former holy knights now working as bodyguards for a few gold coins. Just then, Charles tugs on Silva's sleeve and quietly suggests they leave. This made Braggio laugh sarcastically, wishing her good luck getting home in one piece with such a weak bodyguard. But then Charles surprises everyone. She turns around and calmly states that Braggio's ugly guards don't even come close to standing at Silva's level. Once they step outside the eatery, Charles apologizes to Silva, saying she just got pissed off watching them mock him like that. Silva gets a little embarrassed, realizing Charles really did get mad on his behalf, and admits she's making him blush. He also acknowledges that maybe the situation went a little too far, but it's perfect. Turning to Charles, Silva asks what she wants him to do about those guys. Before Charles can respond, Braggio's men reappear. One of the thugs says Charles mentioned something that piqued his curiosity, then signals for Silva to follow them into a dark alley. Silva realizes this might be the perfect chance to see if Braggio is truly someone who could shake up the story. So he agrees and calmly announces that he's in for whatever they want to do. A few minutes later, cries erupt from the dark alley. Silva has already beaten the weak thugs to a pulp, tied them up, and is now interrogating them, demanding they spill everything they know about Braggio's crimes. Panicking, the thugs agree and begin revealing the full scope of Braggio's criminal activities. From the interrogation, Silva learns that Braggio is involved in illegal drug dealing, blackmail, threats, and even home invasions. The guy is absolute scum. But one of the thugs insists he's not done. There's still more to reveal. The thug then reveals Braggio's master plan. He says Braggio is trying to gather dirt on the captain of the Knights Order. Once he joins the organization through the entrance trials, he plans to use that information to gain complete control over the Knights Order. Silva realizes the gravity of the threat. Braggio doesn't just want power, he wants to make the Knights Order answer directly to him. If that happens, the lives of the townspeople will be in danger, and the entire country will rot with corruption. Silva decides he has to stop the plot from straying off its natural course, one way or another. He then warns the thugs not to breathe a word about what happened here. In return, he promises not to tell anyone they got completely beaten by him. Finally, he commands them to go back and make up a false report, something about them beating him easily or whatever excuse will keep Braggio off their backs. But then, Charles appears. She looks at Silva and asks how he became that strong. She says she saw him easily wipe out a demon earlier, and no regular soldier is capable of doing something like that. But Silva quickly comes up with a cover story. He lies to Charles, saying he spent years hiding out in the mountains, training. According to him, it was tough, monsters everywhere, and he nearly died every single day. But thanks to that grueling experience, he got stronger. Charles seems impressed and asks if she would get strong too by doing the same kind of training. But Silva reassures her she doesn't need to resort to such perilous methods. He tells her she'll get stronger without going through all that. This made Charles smile, and she says if that's how Silva feels, then she'll trust him. Later, as they continue walking down the street, Charles casually says she's hungry and asks if Silva is going to treat her. Silva replies saying, of course, since every nerd is duty-bound to treat their favorite after all. Finally, the day of the entrance trials for the Knights Order arrives. The announcer explains that the first exam will be a mock battle. He adds that the matches are determined by lottery, and winners will move on to the next phase of the exam. Just then, Braggio spots Silva among the candidates and recognizes him as that dull-looking bodyguard from before. Silva greets him with a smile, saying he didn't expect to see him there. Braggio replies that he could say the same, and then casually mentions that his bodyguards informed him how they beat Silva like a useless thief. But then Braggio narrows his eyes and comments that Silva doesn't look like someone who got a good beating. Smiling sheepishly, Silva lies and says he went to a church afterward and bought a healing potion, though it cost him quite a bit. Braggio mocks Silva, saying he probably struggled just to afford a basic healing potion, and calls him a penny pincher. Then he proudly shows off his expensive armor, bragging that it's made from orichalcum ore, one of the rarest materials around. Just then, the exam begins. Silva and Braggio are called to the center of the training grounds for their match. Braggio then laughs maniacally, calling Silva an unlucky fellow. He says he never imagined Silva would actually end up as his opponent in the trial. Turning to the examiner, Braggio asks what would happen if he accidentally murders his opponent. The examiner replies bluntly that it would lead to immediate disqualification. Braggio sighs in disappointment, then turns back to Silva with a smirk and says he's narrowly escaped. The match begins, and Braggio suddenly charges forward, ready to strike. But Silva casually flicks his finger, causing Braggio's sword to magically slip right out of his hand. Braggio looks surprised for a moment, but quickly recovers and brags that Silva would have lost if the hit had connected. While he blabbers on, Silva analyzes the situation. If he lands a strong hit, Braggio might actually die. But if he holds back too much, that expensive armor of his will probably deflect the blow. Clutching his hand nervously, Bragio asks Silva if he's not going to attack. Silva smirks and suggests he could just return the favor by attacking the same way Bragio did earlier. Bragio panics but tries to save face, bragging that since he made the first move, it was basically a handicap. So this time, he'll be generous and let Silva launch the first attack. But Silva knows the truth. The proud fool doesn't want to attack again because his arm has gone numb and he can't swing his sword properly anymore. So with a calm smile, Silva says he'll take him up on that offer. Silva strikes immediately with devastating precision. Bragio barely manages to block the attack but crashes hard to the ground. Silva then calmly teases him, asking if he tripped. Red-faced and embarrassed, Bragio mutters that yes, he tripped. Struggling to get up, Bragio insists he hasn't gone all out yet. He shamelessly claims Silva just had one lucky break after another and has only managed to survive by chance. But at that moment, Silva decides it's time to end the fight with the technique he didn't want to use in the first place. With his sword in hand, Silva activates his magic enhancement ability. It's explained that magic is essentially one's inner mental energy. If you clad your body in it, you become as strong as steel. If you clad your sword in it, it can slice through iron as easily as butter. However, most people go their entire lives without ever sensing magic, let alone using it. To become a hero, one must be capable of freely manipulating magic. Silva casually asks Bragio about his fancy orichalcum armor, and Bragio demands to know why he was asking. However, Bragio can tell something has changed about Silva. His whole presence feels overwhelming. Noticing Silva approaching him, Bragio panics and asks what he is trying to pull. Silva calmly replies, saying he's attacking, and then points out that Bragio won't win this duel unless he actually attacks. Bragio's confidence shatters. Desperation takes over and he starts accusing Silva of planning to eliminate him, and how those bottom feeders must have hired Silva for cheap. But Silva just stares back with those cold, calculating eyes that promise death. Panic sets in completely, and Bragio realizes those deadly calm eyes make it clear that Silva wants to destroy him for real. In pure desperation, Bragio then tries to buy his way out. He offers Silva tons of money, more than Charles could ever afford. He wants Silva to throw the fight and let him win, but then Bragio makes his fatal mistake. He starts talking about giving Silva pretty baddies that are way hotter than Charles. Silva's demeanor shifts instantly. His voice turns ice cold as he asks Bragio to shut his trap and then warns him to never mention Charles' name again. Silva's had enough games. He raises his magic-enhanced sword and unleashes his signature technique, Zelensha's sword-style white waterfall. The attack explodes forward like a torrent of pure destruction. The magic-enhanced blade cuts through Bragio's precious orichalcum armor like it's made of paper. All that expensive gear he bragged about gets shredded to pieces. Bragio crashes to the ground, completely defeated, while Silva stands victorious, having accomplished his mission perfectly. The entire crowd stares at Silva in amazement. The announcer then loudly declares Silva the winner as everyone's chattering excitedly about the incredible technique they just witnessed. Meanwhile, in the crowd, Elda sits quietly observing what just happened, clearly impressed. Silva starts to sweat nervously looking around the boisterous crowd as he realizes he might have drawn too much attention to himself. Later that day at the night headquarters, Elda thanked Silva for successfully stopping Bragio from joining the order. However, she emphasized that Bragio's wrongdoings were absolutely unforgivable. She promised that once they gathered solid proof of his crimes, the pompous knucklehead would be tossed straight into jail. Silva grinned wickedly, saying he was counting on the captain to follow through. In his mind, he felt relieved that it was finally time to make that scumbag pay for insulting Charles. Since he has completed his part of the deal, Elda tells Silva that from now on, she won't invite him to join the Knight's Order anymore. Silva lights up with relief. This is exactly what he wants to hear. At last, his peaceful days are finally coming back. But on a more serious note, Elda asks if he's really sure about this decision, wanting to be absolutely certain. Silva enthusiastically confirms that he has zero interest in becoming a knight. Upon hearing this, Elda's composure completely crumbles. She slams the desk and shouts that Silva should work for her as a knight. She desperately pleads with him, saying she wants to have him by her side. Silva panics, protesting that this is totally different from what she promised. Elda sighs and admits she needs to keep her word, while Silva, lost in thought, wonders how he never expected the spoiled brat Elder event to happen right now. Still, he gently pulls out a handkerchief and offers it to her. Elda sniffs and quietly thanks him, promising to wash it and give it back when she's done. After leaving the knight headquarters, Silva returns to his peaceful life as a gate guard. Some guards at the gate, noticing him, comment that he looks different from what they've heard about him. Meanwhile, Silva keeps his head down, trying to stay low profile for the time being. But when the guards start gossiping about another demon sighting, mentioning it's the third one this month, Silva's attention sharpens. His mind starts racing. The main story is set to begin soon, so maybe the increase in demon activity is connected to the plot. Silva reflects that he's already drawn way too much attention to himself, and he just hopes his recent actions won't twist the story in some unexpected way. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out behind him. Silva turns and freezes as someone lands behind him with a loud thud. It's a new female character who appears in an explosion of power and elegance. Silva recognizes the pretty girl immediately as Kaguya, the special grade hero. Everyone nearby starts chattering excitedly, wondering what the mighty Lady Kaguya is doing there. Kaguya approaches Silva with a warm smile, calling him darling and saying she's been looking for him forever. Nervous, Silva immediately tries to sneak away, thinking he needs to keep contact with main characters to an absolute minimum. Kaguya grabs him by the collar, asking where he thinks he's running off to, leaving his dear wife behind. This Kaguya girl who showed up out of the blue is also a conquerable love interest. She's a non-standard being, the only hero granted the title of special grade. She's exceptionally skilled in magic, and word has it she once wiped out a level 4 demon, ripping it apart while laughing. She's basically humanity's trump card. But just like Elda, Kaguya knows about Silva's true abilities. Ever since she discovered them, she's been fixated on him for certain reasons. Yet in the game, Alan is supposed to be her soulmate. Kaguya smiles sweetly, saying fate must have brought them together here. Frustrated, Silva reminds her of the demons that have been showing up lately. He asks her to forget about him for now and focus on her hero's duties. But Kaguya simply replies that none of that interests her. Being with him, she says, is far more charming to her. With a disappointed look, Silva asks if she can really call herself a hero after what she just said. Kaguya cheerfully responds, saying of course she can. After all, she's allowed to be with him as his wife. She then casually asks when they should hold their wedding ceremony. Silva admits that talking to her feels like talking to a brick wall, even if her offer is strangely tempting. Kaguya then suggests they find an interesting cafe so they can enjoy some quality couple time and tea, just the two of them. Silva reluctantly agrees, but as he tries to slip away, Kaguya grabs onto him tightly, refusing to let him escape. Meanwhile, sometime later at the Holy Knights Order headquarters, Elda sits at her desk looking frustrated while staring at a paper. From the report, she deduces that the Holy Knights have failed yet again to catch the creatures. She regrets that if only Silva were with them, things might have gone differently. Calling out Silva's name softly, she stares sadly at the handkerchief he gave her. She reflects on how strange he is, but also acknowledges his strength. Even though she finds herself in a difficult position, she can't help but expect Silva to do something about it. In a flashback, Elda remembers the battle where she and Silva first crossed paths. In that battle, someone suddenly shouts that they've captured the hero, which is the worst thing anyone could hear on a battlefield. Given the overwhelming number of enemies during that battle, the panic is understandable. As the commander, Elda immediately calls for everyone to fall back while she stays behind to buy time. The situation looks dire, forcing them to request Kaguya's help to deal with the crisis. Until she arrives, it's Elda's duty to keep the damage caused by the demons to a minimum. There's still a bit of time before Kaguya reaches the scene, so Elda decides to whittle down the enemy numbers as much as she can. Suddenly, she is attacked as one of the demons lunges at her with deadly intent. She cries out in pain but manages to stab the demon, declaring that she has no intention of sacrificing herself for free. Her eyes burn with determination and her sword glows as she fights to protect her people. When she spots an opening, she charges at the demon with her blade, but the creature dodges easily, unfazed. Grinning wickedly, the demon turns and starts chasing after her fellow knights. Elda springs into action, giving pursuit to protect the weaker knights who are frozen in fear. That's when she sees him for the first time. Silva, standing firm and staring down the incoming demon with a boldness unlike anything she's ever seen. He isn't wearing the silver armor of the Holy Knights. Instead, he's dressed in worn-out shoes and a battered set of steel armor. At first, Elda panics and tries shouting for him to get out of the way. But she's stunned as she watches Silva, calmly and without hesitation, step forward and with one epic slash, hack the demon's head clean off, all while muttering a bunch of incomprehensible gibberish. Elda has never seen anything like that, and in that moment she falls in love. In her eyes, Silva is the most beautiful among all the knights she has ever seen to date. Ever since then, she has been incessantly trying to recruit Silva into the Holy Knight's order, but he continues to reject all her efforts. Even though Silva chooses to deny it, Elda knows, without a shadow of doubt, that he was given such remarkable power for a reason. He was meant to protect the world. The following day, Elda arrives at the attack scene to personally assess the damage caused by the demons. The knight stationed at the scene briefs her on the situation. He informs her that there are 2 casualties, and the demon responsible seems to be a cunning one. Hardly any traces were left behind. The knight suggests they call the hero. Elda tells him the hero has already been notified, but for now, they need to focus on the investigation before he arrives. She instructs him to continue with the report. Obeying, the knight resumes. He mentions that both victims attacked by the demon are women, and both have bite marks, which suggests their blood was sucked out. Leading Elda to where the women's corpses are, the knight speculates that the demon responsible might be a level 3. With a horrified expression, Elda mutters how awful it is as she looks at the bite marks on the women's necks and their lifeless bodies. She immediately turns to the knight and instructs him to inform all knights and soldiers to go on full alert and expand their search radius for the demon. She also orders him to head to the gate at once and tells Silva to report to the Knight's Order headquarters. 48 hours later, Silva arrives at the Knight's Order headquarters with Kaguya by his side. Kaguya grins widely, bubbling with excitement about their first task together as a couple. Silva, visibly stressed, pleads with her to stop using such weird phrasing. He's already dragged himself into a messy situation by agreeing to investigate the demon attack, and now he has Kaguya following him around like a lovesick puppy. When they arrive at Elda's office, Elda informs Silva that a vampire is indeed the culprit behind the recent demon attack. She explains that vampire has become a popular nickname for the demon responsible for the blood-sucking incidents. According to the available evidence, 2 victims were found completely drained of blood, each with bite marks on their necks. While briefing Silva on the issue, Elda notices that Kaguya is practically glued to his side. Shocked, she demands to know what Kaguya is doing there. But Kaguya just tightens her grip on Silva's arm, calmly insisting that whatever she does or wherever she chooses to be is none of Elda's business. Elda immediately flares up. She slams her hand on the desk, calls Kaguya a lascivious wench, and orders her to get away from Silva. Kaguya insists she's just linking hands with Silva, though Elda clearly wants her to get the heck away from him. While Kaguya calls her uptight, Elda sits stiffly at her desk, clearly stressed, and reminds them that she's in the middle of a serious conversation. She cuts straight to business, telling Silva they need to get back on track and focus on the matter at hand. She explains the gravity of the situation. They believe the demon's level is over 3, which makes it extremely dangerous. Worse, the demon has the ability to shapeshift into human form. Since they still haven't figured out where the creature is hiding, it must be blending in perfectly with humans. While Silva considers how a level 3 demon would normally require 10 skilled knights to handle, Elda looks at him with determination in her eyes and declares that it's his time to shine. Silva plays humble, insisting he's just a gate guard and that errands are the only thing he's honestly good at. But Elda admits they're short on manpower. She tries to persuade him further, saying she doesn't mind if he acts independently, as long as he helps with the investigation. But as she speaks, Silva catches a suspicious tone in her voice. He narrows his eyes and asks if she doesn't have any ulterior motives. Elda starts laughing nervously, clearly caught off guard. She claims she doesn't have some big plan or anything like that. It's not like she's hoping that, by Silva doing well on the investigation, others will start seeing him in a better light, making it easier for her to invite him into the Knight's Order later. But of course, Silva sees right through her. Elda realizes she's been completely found out and laughs awkwardly. Nevertheless, Silva sighs and agrees to take on the investigation since it's an official order. But suddenly, Kaguya pops up and announces she'll help him out too. Elda panics, yelling that if Kaguya joins the investigation, it completely ruins her plan. But Kaguya says she doesn't care about the investigation itself. She just wants to be wherever Silva goes. Realizing there's no stopping the pick-me girl, Elda reluctantly agrees, figuring they could use all the help they can get anyway. She then informs both of them that they'll need to attend the investigation meeting to get properly briefed on the situation. After that, Silva and Kaguya head outside the Knight's headquarters. As they walk, a few knights nearby notice Kaguya with a random nobody and start whispering. One of them wonders who the guy is, while another asks if the dude with Kaguya is even a soldier. At the round table meeting, the briefing begins regarding the vampire attack. The room is filled with knights, all gathered to hear the report. One knight explains that there are 2 victims, both women in their 20s, and their corpses were found in the northern part of the capital. Silva thinks to himself that this particular case didn't exist in the main story of the game, which means the main characters won't be getting involved, and the case will probably sort itself out eventually. As the meeting continues, Silva notices that Kaguya has dozed off, completely unbothered. Someone mentions that, in a nutshell, they'll expand the search radius and begin night patrols. So Kaguya and Silva are both assigned to patrol the eastern gate. With the meeting concluded, Silva nervously calls out to Kaguya, telling her it's time to start the investigation. But then he notices she's still fast asleep and wonders how she's still sleeping through all this noise. Looking down at her peaceful sleeping face, he mutters that seriously, she needs to wake up. Suddenly, a gruff knight with a face rough enough to sandpaper wood approaches and demands to know which group Silva has been assigned to. When Silva mentions the guard regiment at the eastern gate, the knight explodes in disbelief. He can't understand what Captain Elda is thinking, pairing up the special grade hero with a mere soldier of all people. Fuming, he declares that Kaguya is supposed to be teaming up with them, the Second Holy Knight's order. Silva immediately suspects the rough-faced knight is just trying to steal credit from Elda. Still, he tries to reason with him, calmly pointing out that who Kaguya teams up with isn't his call to make. The tension escalates as the knight accuses Silva of running his mouth. The knight insists the case is beyond the capabilities of a weak soldier like him and tells him to withdraw from the investigation. Silva refuses and calmly responds that he's acting under orders from the captain of the First Holy Knight's Order. The situation heats up fast. The knight throws a punch at Silva, shouting at him to shut up and declaring that the Second Holy Knights don't give a damn about orders from the First. Someone in the background quickly warns the knight that he's going too far. But the knight grabs Silva aggressively, yelling that they're the Second Holy Knight's Order, and they'll never allow the First to outshine them. Suddenly, Kaguya is wide awake and extremely annoyed as she tells the knight to shut his filthy traps. She's pissed off that someone had the nerve to disturb her darling. Silva tries to calm her down, but it's already too late. She's in full combat mode. With rising panic, Silva realizes Kaguya is about to go berserk on an entire room full of knights. With deadly intent, Kaguya grabs her weapon and with one swift strike, sends the smug knight flying across the room while ordering everyone to stay back. After completely demolishing the Second Holy Knight, Kaguya stands over his defeated, crumpled body with a menacing smile. She declares that anyone who dares lay a hand on her husband will face her wrath. Silva, sweating nervously, tells her she's gone and done it, completely destroying any chance he had at staying low profile. Kaguya then apologizes sweetly, admitting she's just really bad at holding back. Later that night, as they walk through the city on their night patrol, Kaguya grins and calls their patrol romantic. Still rattled about what happened earlier, Silva asks if she could avoid using magic out of the blue like that, saying it's bad for his heart. But Kaguya responds that it's only natural for a wife to protect her husband. When she reminds him that the guy had attacked him, Silva admits she did save his skin, but he still thinks she went too far. Kaguya then leans in close and says that since she protected him, she wants him to praise her. Silva just stares at her like she's speaking in an alien language. Noticing his skeptical look, Kaguya asks what's with the suspicious expression on his face. She continues her flirtatious assault, insisting she's not lying about her feelings. She says she loves him because of how he looks after others, because teasing him is fun, and most importantly, because of the strength he hides from the world. Kaguya adds that one day she wants to see him go all out, but Silva doubts that day will ever come. When he hesitates, Kaguya explains that responsibility is part of being strong. Silva quietly admits he doesn't really know about that, lost in thought as he reflects on what responsibility truly means. Just then, Kaguya floats slightly above the ground and points out how beautiful the moon looks. Silva's eyes widened, not just at the moon, but at how beautiful she looks in that moment. He asks where that observation came from. Kaguya playfully suggests that, hypothetically, if she said she was born from the moon, would he believe her? The question sparks a moment of reflection in Silva. He knows the truth about Kaguya. She was chosen as a vessel for secretive research aimed at harvesting magic from the moon. But in a twist of fate, the moon's magic transformed young Kaguya into the strongest warrior. With quiet certainty, Silva answers that yes, he would believe her. Kaguya then smiles and thanks him, this time with genuine emotion in her voice. Silva realizes he's thinking about her story from the game, which honestly would be more romantic if she really did come from the moon. But when Kaguya starts blushing at his comment about romance, Silva panics and insists that's not what he meant. That only gets Kaguya more excited. She grins and asks if he's teasing his wife like that, warning him that kind of behavior could count as emotional abuse. But Silva quickly clarifies that she's not actually his wife. But then suddenly everything changes. Silva catches a strange, disgusting scent in the air. His eyes narrow as he immediately recognizes what it is. A scream pierces the night, and without hesitation, both of them dash toward the sound. Turning into a dark alley, Silva's intuition is confirmed. There, in the shadows, the vampire demon is hunched over, feeding on the neck of his latest victim. Silva rushes to the scene, shouting at the demon and demanding to know what the hell it's doing. The demon, noticing him draw his sword, immediately leaps onto the roof of a nearby house. Silva moves closer and finds a woman collapsed on the ground. Fortunately, she's still breathing, which comes as a relief. Without wasting a second, Silva tells Kaguya to take her to the medical office while he goes after the demon. Kaguya agrees, saying she doesn't mind, but asks if he'll be okay on his own. Silva responds with confidence, telling her not to worry and to just leave it to him. Silva activates his magical enhancement and takes off in pursuit of the vampire. He leaps across rooftops with incredible speed, his enhanced abilities letting him close the distance with ease. His eyes stay sharp and focused as he spots his target darting ahead, running fast through the night. The vampire tries to escape, but Silva is relentless. He launches himself through the air with incredible agility, chasing the demon across the city. The creature, realizing it can't outrun Silva's enhanced speed, unleashes a swarm of vampire blood bats to slow him down. Silva is surprised the cursed demon can summon minions to fight for him. The blood bats strike with their claws, but Silva is ready. He deflects the attack with his blade, thinking about how much of a pain this whole situation has become. Using Zelencha's sword-style techniques, he launches a wild thrust. Finally, he catches up to the demon with his superior speed. As he engages the vampire in close combat, the creature unleashes even more of its bat minions. Silva curses at how creepy and annoying this fight has become. But now that it's come to this, he's fully committed to ending the threat once and for all. Will Silva annihilate this vampire demon? Comment Game World Hero if you're hyped to see what happens next in Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Thanks for watching, as always.